Well, we've got breaking news, tensions mounting, the mood at the Northern California courthouse growing more intense as the defendant herself takes the witness stand and describes this moment when she removed and rescued 4 chickens from a slaughter truck in June of 2023. She told the jury of 7 men and 5 women she believed her actions were lawfully justified to prevent what she described as criminal animal abuse at the slaughterhouse. Meanwhile, the company in question has issued a new statement in the wake of the defendant's testimony, and it is a very strong statement indeed. They are saying that, and they told this, or the San Francisco Chronicle put this in their article. A spokesperson for Petaluma Poultry wrote after Rosenberg's testimony that the break-in was, quote, a well-planned, deliberate breach of private property with intent to steal, a criminal act that was deliberate, strategic, and bordering on corporate espionage or agro-terrorism. So the terrorism card is now being played. And in response to all of the things that are happening, Unchained TV has issued an editorial calling for live cameras inside all California slaughterhouses and factory farms, pointing out that slaughterhouses are already required by law in Spain, in England, and in Israel, and some other countries as well. So this is not far-fetched. We want to go straight out to the courthouse where our reporter Matthew Zerbel is standing by. Wow, you're covered in all sorts of shadows, but tell us what the heck is going on in court. Zoe was supposed to take the stand, and apparently there's a lot of back and forth. Did she testify more today? I know she testified on Friday.
Yeah, Zoe unexpectedly took the stand on Friday. The defense decided not to do recross on Raven Deerbrook, and so straight on to Zoe, our last witness, and of course the defendant. And she was able to give her entire direct testimony on Friday. That's all of her own lawyers asking her questions, really being able to very solidly tell her story. And then the prosecution talked to her for a little while to do the cross-examination, but didn't yet finish with that. And then in the morning, they had a couple more hearings on what kind of things could best of her during the cross-examination. And this afternoon we'll finish up, I expect.
Say it again. All right. Well, I can tell you.
We're breaking up. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. Just what happened today? Okay. We have been monitoring what's happening on the X feed. And this feed is basically the trial as it's coming down. So what I'd like to do, give you a chance, Matthew, to maybe move into another location. You can hold your phone. It's okay. We just want to hear what's happening. So if you could go do that while we basically play what Zoe Rosenberg said to characterize her own testimony. So what I'm going to do is play that and let Zoe Rosenberg herself talk about what she said in her interpretation to the jury.
So I took the stand and I was sworn in. I told them that I entered the slaughterhouse on May 21st, 2023 to investigate, and I entered again on June 13th and I rescued Poppy, Ivy, Asher, and Azalea. I told them why I believed criminal animal cruelty was happening at the slaughterhouse, why I believed birds were being scalded alive and birds were being improperly stunned and flailing in distress on the kill floor. And I told them why I believed these 4 chickens were sick and in desperate need of rescue. The prosecution has started to cross-examine me. They went for about 30 minutes and they will continue on Monday. Also, Carla Rodriguez, the district attorney of Sonoma County, was hiding in the back of the courtroom. Apparently, this is more important than all of the murder cases and sexual assault cases that she has going on. She just had to watch the chicken rescue trial case.
Wow. Well, first of all, I think it's extraordinary that the district attorney of this county is there in the courtroom watching this case. You know, Shaka Smith, you heard it. the defendant is like, hello, whatever you believe, I took 4 chickens from a slaughter truck. There are murders. There are, unfortunately, rapes. There are break-ins. Like, what does this say about their priorities, Shaka, as an attorney?
Well, they certainly don't like to lose cases, and we know that this case might spell different losses or potential harm for other cases they have going forward. So this could really, really upend the whole way they go after animal rescue cases.
Well, I mean, yeah, but when you think about the priorities, right? Does she have a point? Like, why is the district attorney of this county in this courtroom? Not to say she doesn't have a right to be there.
Probably the moneyed interest. I would certainly say they're probably being pushed by these different farms.
It's interesting because industrialized agriculture obviously is watching this very carefully. They issued a brochure. Here it is. They sent this out. Now, some people are claiming to everybody in the county, but to a lot of people, saying stand with Sonoma County's poultry workers. So that's a glossy. Direct Action Everywhere did some reverse image checks and said that they didn't believe the photos are even from the United. Some of them are not from the United States. They're from foreign countries. In other words, they're pretty pictures. And that is at the heart of this case. The difference between what animal agriculture portrays and what is actually happening behind closed doors. Again, I want to point out, and we have Matthew back. So let's go back to Matthew because he's at the courthouse. We want to know what happened this morning, Matthew.
Hi, Jane. Sorry for the internet troubles. It's a little spotty out here. This morning was motions to determine what could be discussed by the prosecution as they finish up cross-examining Zoe, I believe. I was not there this morning, but that was what was scheduled on the docket. For a long time, we had known that it was going to be a big discussion once she testifies to what the prosecution is able to bring in to try and claim that her testimony might be wrong. One of the biggest things they want to bring in is some of the previous actions, like the Reichard action, that Zoe may have been present for, and could say, the prosecution wants to say that maybe she should know that these legal opinions weren't correct because there were people who were arrested after that. Now, they got a little bit into that in her cross-examination on Friday, and she was actually able to make the point very clearly that people who were arrested were only people who were doing civil disobedience, not chickens. That's the angle that they want to try anyway. And so
my question, though,
that'll continue today.
What I don't understand is how did her direct testimony, how did it happen so quickly? This trial is what, in its 6th week or something? I've lost track, frankly. I was like, day what? It's day 20 or day 21. I don't even know anymore. This has been going on for so long. And then I was so shocked to find that she took the stand on Friday. But you're telling me, just see if you can answer this question. Her direct testimony is over. It was done that quickly. All right.
Yeah, I was surprised as well.
So it is, and now we're on cross-examination.
And then they happen very quickly.
Okay, you know what? We can't hear you. Sorry, dude. I'm going to have to pop you out. All right, let me go to Tiffany Brunelli. You've been tracking what's happening in court. What I'm hearing is her direct testimony came and went. It was powerful, but now the defense has to basically do defense as the prosecution cross-examines. And what we found out is that in the cross-examination, there were the introduction by the prosecution of flash drives containing clips totaling 5 minutes provided at the last minute. And the defense is saying basically that's too much for us to just absorb and have the jury come back and have us have to deal with this. This was provided at the last minute. They said that they need more time. The defense needs more time. So I want to go to Justine Block. Justine, is it allowed for one side or the other to suddenly bring in like all these documents in a flash drive containing clips totaling 5 minutes provided at the last minute?
Well, I think that the judge is going to have to decide whether this is coming in. I am not entirely following what they're asking for, what to be brought in at this point. I do want to address what you said about Zoe's testimony, because we are gathering information from the X feed, and from that it sounded that she had very concise, clear testimony, and the defense is probably being cautious as far as not to open the door to further cross-examination of Zoe. So at this point, perhaps from what is being requested to be brought in, the prosecution may be scrambling to try to continue proving their case. Maybe they're concerned they didn't do a good enough job proving their case in the direct, and they're scrambling to get more in to prove their case. That's just speculation.
No, I mean, first of all, the prosecution's case was quite short. We remember, I think it was just 3 witnesses approximately. We're going to go to you in a second, Tiffany. So we all said, wow, this is such a short prosecution case. Weeks and weeks of pretrial hearings and all sorts of, drama. And then the prosecution's case is 3 short witnesses. And then everybody said, well, wait a second, just wait till the defense case ends. And then their rebuttal case, then they're going to come, as soon as Zoe gets on the stand, that's when they're going to come out with guns blazing. And it appears that part of that strategy is to drop a flash drive containing clips totaling 5 minutes of evidence that at least the Perdue rescue trial feed says was provided at the last minute, with the defense attorney saying, wait a second, don't call the jury in. We need to review all this evidence. The judge agrees more time is needed to review the evidence, but he didn't say, take forever. I think he said, we'll check back in 30 minutes. What are your thoughts, Tiffany?
Yeah, I'm looking at the X feed, and there's 14 incidents that the judge has approved that the prosecution can question her about. It's all kinds of stuff, including fake blood, Foster Farms protests, even something from the recent a speech that she gave at the recent Animal Liberation Conference. There's all kinds. So 14 incidents that the judge has approved that they can cross-examine her on. It looks like the jury may not come back today. The defense may need more time. But I think I think about all this, I'm thinking they can cross-examine her on all these incidents or demos to try and paint her as an extreme activist. But she's not allowed to bring in all the incidents before of when she rescued sick animals or sick chickens. They only get to show little clips of this or that. It doesn't seem fair that they can bring in all this and she gets to show this much of some animal videos, the cruelty.
Meanwhile, in another post here, it says that the prosecutor asked Zoe Rosenberg whether she compares herself to Martin Luther King Jr., referring to a San Francisco Chronicle article from May of this year, which reported the adversity great social justice leaders such as Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi had to overcome: public ridicule, arrests, and even time behind bars. Hey, Rosenberg tells herself, that's me right now. Rosenberg responded in her testimony, she never said that the reporter had paraphrased her. More accurately, she said she took lessons from the experiences of these great social justice leaders and applies them to today's animal rights movement. And you know what, Ellen Dent? There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
Absolutely not. We learn from those who went before us, like Martin Luther King, like Malcolm X, like all of these, wonderful leaders, Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, the list goes on. Zoe Rosenberg is definitely facing adversity right now. She is trying to achieve social change. So really, what is the difference here? She is a leader in her own right. She's incredibly vocal, incredibly eloquent, incredibly intelligent. I really could go on and on about how much I admire her and her courage, facing this trial, facing being locked up while she's so ill. Her life is literally on the line right now, and people need to understand the gravity of that.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting is that, this talk about her comparing herself to Martin Luther King Jr. Well, guess who actually did that? Not Zoe, but Moby, the music icon.
So the fact that the Chronicle and Yahoo News are covering it and calling it a chicken rescue trial, I think that's great.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, so it's people want to do the right things, but I feel like everyone's just so overwhelmed. We made a movie last summer and Zoe was in the movie. What I would say to Zoe, because I've never been in that situation, so I can't be so presumptuous as to say I understand it, but when you look at history, the number of people who've been where she is, the people who've been arrested and persecuted for their ethical beliefs, she's certainly in good historical company. She's in company with Cesar Chavez and Martin Luther King Jr. and on and on and on, like with the suffragettes. Like, so many people have been arrested for doing the right thing. So I don't know if there's any comfort in that, but she's certainly on the right side of history.
So what's so interesting, Annie Abram, is, and I'll go to you in a second, Shaka, but the prosecution is accusing the defendant of comparing herself to Martin Luther King Jr. Meanwhile, famous people who are asked about this case are comparing her to Martin Luther King Jr.
It's truly hilarious that they are trying to use such a schema, to a very humble, very unselfish, beautiful individual. When Martin Luther King did the actions, just like Zoe Rosenberg, he didn't think of name or fame. He thought of compassion. He thought of the victims above and beyond his comfort zone, his life, his everything he put online in order to try and speak up for the victims. And so is Zoe. Unselfish act, they're trying to diminish her beautiful action, the blissful stand she took, unselfish stand she took as an exemplary citizen, to try and diminish that. She's a hero. She's a rescue hero. She's a beautiful person, unselfish person. And that should ring in everybody's ear. And that's what should lead this court, this
Attorney
hearing.
Shaka Smith, your thoughts?
I think they could be setting it up as a trap because, you have Martin Luther King Jr., who knew what he was doing was against the law and willing to be arrested for it. Zoe has testified that she thought the open rescue was lawful and necessary, and that will negate the conspiracy charge. So she has to be very careful with how she's answering the prosecutor's questions, because she wants to say, no, it wasn't I was willing to be arrested. I thought this was lawful and necessary.
Very good point. And she said she did not compare herself to Martin Luther King, that she said she learned from the lessons of Martin Luther King. Now, we have a societal divide in this case. Breaking news. After she took the stand, and I'll say it again because this is important news, and we invite Petaluma Poultry on anytime. We would love to dialogue with them. That's an open invitation. The spokesperson for Petaluma Poultry, this was published in the San Francisco Chronicle over the weekend, said Rosenberg characterized it as a break-in was a well-planned, deliberate breach of private property with intent to steal, a criminal act that was deliberate, strategic, and bordering on corporate espionage or agro-terrorism, which is a new term, I guess, the industry wants to coin. Now, other people would say, animal advocates, that the terrorism that's happening is the killing of so many animals in industrialized animal agriculture, where 75 billion animals at least are killed, 80 billion here in 2022, and the numbers continue to go up with massive environmental repercussions for human health, and obviously repercussions for the animals. So you have a complete societal divide. And it wasn't just Moby speaking out. Our reporter, Michelle Celestino, also caught up with another famous person, and this is Derek Green. He is the lead singer of a globally famous group called Sepultura, and here's what he had to say. So on one side, you have industry saying that going in there and showing what's happening is agro-terrorism. On the other side, well, let's hear what Derek Green has to say.
I think that's ridiculous that they would actually want to put somebody in jail for that. It doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of money for everyone's money, and it's a waste of time. There's nothing criminal about that at all.
She could have taken a plea deal, but she decided to go to court.
Well, good for her. I think that's great. To stick up for your values and stick up for what you believe in. It's important to stand behind that. And as harsh as it can be or may be the outcome, I think it's really important that you have people that are going the extra mile to really show their views and their point of view.
All right. So, Tiffany Brunelli, what is your reaction to this cultural divide? People looking at the same thing and completely different descriptions. One saying their prosecution is a waste of time and ridiculous, and the other people saying, well, it's agro-terrorism.
Yeah, I think it's an example that we often use. If this was about dogs or cats, would anyone be saying that? No. And I also want to say, I was talking to an activist friend about when the prosecutor asked Zoe about these questions, do you think you're like Martin Luther King Jr.? And she had a different take on it. She said, that may actually be in the defense's, that may play well for the defense, because some of the jurors might start to think, oh, this is like a civil rights or gay rights movement. So she thought it was actually a good question.
In other words, she thought it was a question that could actually help the defense and get them thinking, well, maybe she is a hero connected to those or comparable to those like Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. I thought about this on Friday, and I did a little research, and I found out that in Spain, in England, and in Israel, along with one or two other countries, but those were the ones I came up with, it's required by law to have cameras in the slaughterhouses. So whereas you have somebody saying, I have to go in there and I have to show what's happening. I've tried to get the authorities to investigate. They won't investigate. There are animal cruelty laws. I am alleging criminal animal cruelty. I've handed in video evidence and other evidence over and over again. They won't investigate. Okay. And so I had to go in there and do that. And here's what I saw. And then on the other side, you have industry saying this is agro-terrorism. We can't have people sneaking in, corporate espionage. There's an easy way to resolve this, and that is cameras in all slaughterhouses. Now, Spain has already required for years surveillance cameras inside slaughterhouses. It is mandatory in England as well as Israel. But we here in California need to go even further. And the editorial I wrote and published, which you can read on UnchainedTV.com, calls for live cameras inside all slaughterhouses and factory farms that is not just visible, for example, to some bureaucrat. Because in Israel, for example, the feed is sent to an agricultural agency. But we know that government agencies historically ignore evidence and accusations of animal cruelty. So what we need, and what I'm calling for, are live cameras inside all slaughterhouses and factory farms in California, and that live feed be online, available to consumers, to citizens, 24/7, 365, with no blind spots. What is the reaction? Let's start with Annie. You're shaking your head. What do you think?
I would say intent is important. What's the motivation? Animal
The
agriculture.
motivation, I'll answer that, is transparency.
No,
What
with the
is
animal
happening
agriculture.
on these slaughterhouse floors? You have the industry saying nothing to see here, and we invite them on anytime. They're saying that they have the highest humane standards. You could see it. You can go to corporate.perduefarms.com/responsibility/animal-care, and they are invited on anytime to further elaborate on their record on animal welfare. They say they have the highest standard of animal welfare. Okay. And on the other hand, you have people saying that what's happening inside these factory farms and these slaughterhouses is criminal animal cruelty. And one of the things that was pointed out, and I point out in the editorial, the company says no crates, but let's just look at what this is, the video of the alleged crime in progress. These chickens are being taken out of crates. I think we can all agree with that. So if there is a way, complete transparency to see what's actually going on, and we don't have to rely on anybody's interpretation, the animal activists or the corporation, let the people who purchase these products, or some who don't, but the citizens decide. What are your thoughts on that? And I'll bring in Ellen Dent on that one.
I mean, I completely 100% agree. There should be cameras in these places. What exactly are they trying to hide? Why are they so upset that somebody goes in there and takes video and, helps rescue these animals that are in need of being rescued, obviously from this footage, that DXE has alleged has happened in these farms. So I really feel like the public has a right to know. They have a right to see. We say that these slaughterhouses should have glass walls, and if they did, the public would react so much differently, to who is on their plate, the pieces of these animals, that end up neatly packaged inside the store. The story behind that is, so much different. So I couldn't agree more that there should be transparency.
Okay. People commenting, they say, this is important. We should push for this, because literally this is not taking sides. I mean, it's saying, look, there's two radically different interpretations and descriptions and characterizations of one thing happening. So show the thing that's happening. Surveillance cameras are ubiquitous. They are used in shopping centers to prevent shoplifting. They're used in airports. They're used on the street to prevent red light cameras. Anybody who's ever gotten a ticket for making a right turn on a do not turn knows this. This is a modern era. And I keep bringing this out, but we all have them. They're very cheap and they're very effective, and they can be placed and stuck anywhere, because part of the reason I think that they're talking about agro-terrorism is that Raven Deerbrook, who went in and who actually was trying to essentially claim responsibility for leadership, she says she's the one who led the Petaluma poultry break-ins tied to the Rosenberg case. She planted cameras. And so she can't be prosecuted anymore because she reached a plea deal. But the point is that part of it isn't just going in there, it's that they planted cameras, but they wouldn't have to plant. If you don't like cameras being planted, then plant cameras, because there is a controversy over what's happening inside industrialized animal agriculture. And it's not just this particular company or this particular county or even this particular state. It is global. That's why Spain has required surveillance cameras in slaughterhouses. England has required it. Israel has required it. And so it's not a crazy idea. When I came up with it, I thought, well, let's see. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that this is not something that is unheard of at all. Shaka, what are your thoughts?
I think that's a great idea. Of course, they're going to push back against that, knowing their standards and practices do not comply with what they're necessarily saying and what you would see on camera. But certainly for all parties, I think it would be a beneficial thing. People would actually look more favorably on these companies if they did that.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody said in our panel, if you have nothing to hide, why would you be against it? This is the process. Justine, obviously would require somebody in the state legislature in California, the 5th largest economy in the world. The other day I said it was the 4th. It was the 4th largest, but when I looked it up again, it fell back to the 5th. It's sort of wobbling on that, but it's huge. This California is a huge economy. Let's say it's the 5th largest. Still, it's huge. What are your thoughts from a legal perspective?
Well, I agree with the comments made so far as to this being a good compromise. If there's precedent in other countries, that is also an important factor in pushing for it. So you're taken seriously with the legislature that this is already something that other countries are doing. And if the industry is saying that everything's fine in the slaughterhouses and people that are criticizing it are eco-terrorists and people investigating are eco-terrorists, well, then show us, then you've nothing to hide, like Ellen said. So I think that the cameras are a good compromise between those two sides. I do want to point out during Raven Deerbrook's testimony, and you alluded to this, Jane, there was quite a back and forth between the prosecutor and Deerbrook about where the cameras were located and the footage that she took. I'm not sure others caught that in the feed on X when Deerbrook was testifying. The prosecutor said that the cameras were in the kill room, and they said, well, then since you didn't have cameras in the pile of dead chickens that you said you believed were scalded alive because of their pink skin, you didn't have cameras there. You can't really back that up. So I thought that was really cutting both ways. And I was thinking, I wonder how a jury would see that, because they're saying, so since you didn't actually catch that on camera, that the birds that you believed were scalded alive, you didn't get the pictures of that. And so that worked against her. So then, okay, let's just have the cameras in the slaughterhouses and push for that. And I think that would further be something to help argue for that transparency.
Well, this Thursday, I'm going to an event where there's going to be a state legislator who has supported animal causes in the past, and I'm going to ask him about it. You know what? Never hurts to ask, to see, because obviously we need somebody to sponsor the bill, and you need somebody in the House, the California House and the California Senate, and it could happen. I mean, honestly, I think for a lot of reasons it would be good, because we know now we have a bird flu, we have cows that have been found on the side of the road due to bird flu. There's different other reasons beyond just discouraging people from going in themselves and putting in cameras, to have cameras in all slaughterhouses and factory farms. So I think it's a great idea, and I am going to push it as much as I can. And so I want to go back to what's happening now, because it seems like, and maybe you can weigh in on this, Shaka, everything was super slow. We had weeks of arguing about, 402 hearings where there was very huge, intense debate about what evidence and what witnesses. And I know from having covered trials in the past that quite often either side will present a very long witness list and then very few people show up. I remember covering the Michael Jackson trial, and the people who were put on the witness list was like every star the defense put, pretty much like a lot of the stars he performed with. So it was like just, Oscar night. But very few of those people were called. Ultimately, it's a game. It's part of the game to psych out the other side. And so it's very common to put a lot more people on the witness list than you're going to call. But we have, in this case, it seems like very compressed after weeks of, before the jury was seated. And now everything's going very, very, very fast. And it feels like Zoe's direct testimony is already over. The cross-examination is happening. I mean, could we have a verdict by Thursday or Friday? What is anybody's guess? Shaka.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we had a verdict by the end of the week. A lot of the stuff that was alleged, Zoe admitted some of the stuff that took place. That she was there and she rescued the chickens. It's really that whole conspiracy thing is what it's really hemming up on for me. And her testimony indicated she thought it was lawful. So the prosecution is going to try to go back and redirect and really try to show that she, in fact, did not think it was lawful. And they're going to use whatever new evidence they're trying to posit to the judge right now to try to do that. So when you go after that specific intent, it's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more tricky, but they're going to get creative to try to do it. But it shouldn't last that long.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Getting back to what she's charged with, the big kahuna is the felony conspiracy. And it is kind of weird to have a felony conspiracy to commit misdemeanors, because misdemeanors like trespass and vehicle tampering, no big whoop. It happens quite often. And that's one of the reasons why to have the district attorney of the county in court during Zoe's testimony is so extraordinary. And this felony conspiracy was used successfully to prosecute and convict Wayne Shung, a constitutional law professor who was the co-founder of Direct Action Everywhere. And they did not charge him with theft. They charged him with this conspiracy count. For a lot of people, it's kind of mumbo jumbo. What the heck is conspiracy? Justine, in people terms, can you break it down? What does the prosecution need to prove that Zoe conspired?
Basically, the prosecution needs to prove that she intended to enter into an unlawful agreement with other people, one, and that there were overt actions toward committing the unlawful action.
Well, expand on that. Overt. So what you're saying is, so we know that Zoe Rosenberg was in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, yes, Zoe Rosenberg was in there. And then this woman, a famed undercover investigator, Raven Deerbrook, was in there. She said, I went in there first and I videotaped stuff first. And then I showed the video to Zoe, and Zoe was so upset by the images of what she said were birds scalded alive that she then was inspired to take action. So, this woman, Raven Deerbrook, said, basically, don't look at the defendant, look at me. That's why I said she threw a curveball. She's saying, I'm the one responsible. But since she already achieved a plea deal, I think it would probably be double jeopardy to go back and prosecute her again, right? Yes? Yeah. So,
yes.
What are your thoughts on that? It's like, if this person's saying, I'm the leader, I'm really the ringleader, doesn't that hurt the prosecution's desire to convict Zoe, who acted upon the videotape that Raven got, of conspiracy?
Well, I think that some of the questions that the prosecutor is asking is trying to still go back to prove their conspiracy crime, and that Zoe, I think that's one reason that they asked her about her education and said, I don't know if others saw this on the feed, but Zoe talked about she was asked if she's smart. There were some statements about you're really smart, and it was kind of strange asking about her being valedictorian and her education, being a graduate of UC Berkeley. That's going toward probably that she is taking a leadership role. They want to try to characterize her, as I'm gathering, as someone who is leading this conspiracy and bring the others together to commit the crime.
Interesting. Well, let me play. Go ahead.
She doesn't have to lead the conspiracy to be part of the conspiracy. She just has to be a part of it. So the fact that the other lady has a plea deal doesn't negate the fact that Zoe might have been involved in the conspiracy. She just needs to establish that she thought it was lawful, so that there was no attempt to do something unlawful at the farm.
And the reason Zoe said that she thought it was lawful, correct me if I'm wrong, because she said this publicly many times, is that She was relying on the necessity defense, which means if you see a greater harm happening, you can commit a lesser offense to prevent a greater harm. The obvious example being if you're walking down the street and you see over the fence on private property a kid drowning in a pool, you hop over the fence, you commit trespass, but you save the child's life, you're not going to be prosecuted for trespass. Essentially, that's what she said she did regarding the chickens, but the judge ruled that the necessity defense does not apply to non-human animals. And that is the crux of the case. But then Zoe also said that she got a letter from a famous lawyer, and this lawyer, who is a former prosecutor herself, famous for taking down drug kingpins and all sorts of people, wrote a letter to her saying, what you're doing is legal. So I think that is, go ahead.
Again, and the necessity defense could have negated the trespass, but that's thrown out. So that's not going to happen there. But get that letter from the lawyer lets Zoe believe that she's not going to commit a trespass, that open rescue is lawful. So in that case, she'll be able to get rid of that charge if the jury believes that. And that's why they questioned her education. The other guy was a constitutional law professor. So under no circumstances should he have thought that there was any way that the trespass could be lawful. So that's why, he got convicted there. But to a jury, would it be reasonable that Zoe Rosenberg thought open rescue was lawful in this case? To me, it seems like the answer is yes, and the prosecution's scrambling to make sure they try to get to that part of the case.
Oh, so that's why they're asking her, oh, you're smart, aren't you? You were valedictorian, that kind of thing. Go ahead, Tiffany Brunelli.
I have a question for the attorneys also. I remember reading in Wayne's case that the prosecutor in Sonoma has a choice. They can either charge the conspiracy as a misdemeanor or a felony. So I know in Wayne's case, they could have charged it as just a misdemeanor, but they went for the felony. I was wondering if it's the same here.
Yeah, I mean, look, every mainstream media is saying this is putting animal agriculture on trial, that they're trying to send they're trying to send a message that it's not going to be tolerated. It's not going to be, treated lightly. But even though Wayne was convicted, he did very little time. And when he emerged, he emerged to many people as a hero and gave a huge speech. In fact, it was right after he was actually convicted and sent to jail that Zoe was arrested. So these cases are very much connected. Wow. We are in the final stretch of this case. I want to just play because Raven Deerbrook is such a key aspect of this. Let's just play what Zoe Rosenberg, the defendant, had to say about Raven Deerbrook, the woman who's a famed undercover investigator who says, no, look at me. I'm the one who led this whole thing. I went in first. I did the videotaping. And then we'll have final thoughts.
She told the jurors that she is testifying because she wants to share the truth about what really happened. She started to walk the jurors through her investigation, and we showed the jury footage of the slaughter line of birds flailing, and we showed them the photos of the bright cherry red birds who we believe had been scalded alive. She talked about how she personally rescued 2 birds on the morning of June 13th, and then she started to be cross-examined by the prosecutor, and then I will likely begin my testimony.
So that ended, Raven ended. She began her testimony. She's finished her direct testimony, Zoe Rosenberg, the defendant, and there's huge battles happening now about what the prosecution can cross-examine her on. Apparently there's 14 things that they can ask her about, her previous activism, where she was involved in open rescues and gave speeches, blah, blah, blah. Final thoughts as we near a very crucial case, a very crucial point in this case. I mean, it's Monday. Let's say the cross-examination happens Tuesday, the end of today, Tuesday. Court's supposed to be dark Wednesday, Thursday, closing statements, possibly Friday, a verdict. I don't know, but that's a guess. Do you think that's a crazy guess, Tiffany, or what do you think?
No, I think that's very possible. I hope that the jury is reading between the lines and can see, maybe some of them are off work for 6 weeks and saying, this is a waste of my time. Why am I here? This is a waste of taxpayers' money to save 4 chickens. So I do hope that they're reading more into it, between the lines of what they're being shown and what they're not being shown. So yeah, I think, yes.
Yeah. Annie Abram, final thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with what Tiffany said. It's a waste of our tax money. It's being dragged for so long. There's a possibility they would do that. And obviously they made a plea deal with Raven because it was gonna change the outcome in a tremendous way to stop that from being shown and for her to testify and etc. However,
I want to point out that Zoe Rosenberg was offered a plea deal and she turned it down. Continue on.
absolutely, because she put again, this is a very unselfish act on Zoe's terms, because she could have easily taken the deal and shut up and silently pushed it under the rug. This kind of case, she needs this openly seen by the public. She believes in the public, she believes in the jury, she believes in the system. Let's not let her down. This is a heroic act. If this was a dog, surely no one would say, oh, you cannot use this as a rescue defense, you cannot use that for a non-human animal. Everybody would jump the gun and say, yes, you should have saved that dog.
Okay.
Dog is no different than a chicken.
Thank
Save
you.
them.
Ellen
Thank
Dent,
you.
your final thought.
Echoing Tiffany and Annie that this is, total waste of resources, to have this trial dragging on and on. I'm glad to see that things are going more quickly, but I'm disappointed because I feel like the prosecution is being very sneaky by, trying to add these 5 minutes or this 5 minutes of video clips last minute, and trying to paint Zoe, as Justine said, as an agro-terrorist, which she is not. They're trying to vilify her. They're trying to make an example of her, just because she didn't, take that plea deal, and because she does want this to be public facing. She's in this fight to win this for these other animals, that needed her to come and rescue them. So, I'm just gonna stand by and hope for the best with the jury, as Annie had said, that they see through this, that they see through these lies, and that the public will see more of what is happening inside of these slaughterhouses. So absolutely get the cameras in there. Good luck on Thursday, and see you all soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen Dent, Animal Alliance Network, Justine Block, attorney.
Thanks, Jane. On the leadership issue, I just wanted to circle back to say, just to refresh people's minds as to the aggravating factor that the judge did not allow. So if Zoe's convicted on the felony conspiracy, the judge was not allowing the leadership aggravating factor to be considered her sentencing, but the prosecution had asked for that to be reconsidered after the defense rests. Secondly, as far as the length of the trial continuing, I think that depends quite a lot on what the judge allowed as far as what more the prosecution can ask and how long the cross-examination goes on for Zoe. And then we're going to be looking at jury instructions and closing statements and all of that as well, to consider. And third, about the district attorney being there sitting in the back watching this. This is a high profile case. There's major stakes at.
All right. I will. You may.
Sorry about that. All right.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say it is a very very high profile case. So I think that's one reason that the DA is in there and watching this really carefully. The public may be asking, just one last thought as far as why the DA is there, is the public might be wondering about the resources spent. There's been so much spent on this case. People might be asking it because it's coming up at trial. Why didn't the police investigate? So that's there's questions that she's going to have to deal with after this case.
Yeah, very interesting. Shaka, your final thought.
I will say I'm definitely heartened by the way I've seen the trial go. I like that from the beginning, it seemed like the defense had a strategy to attack the felony conspiracy, and they've done so very surgically. The DA being in that courtroom means they've noticed what the defense is doing, and it's going well, and they want to make sure their attorneys aren't, involved in any level of malpractice, because they really want to try to get this case going. So I'm heartened by that. I think we could maybe see this go on to one more week, because I'm sure the prosecution got some more tricks up their sleeves when they see that Zoe is kind of winning right now, at least on the felony conspiracy charge. So I'm hoping we have a quick resolution, but it looks like it's going to go the way she wants it to do on the felony conspiracy.
Wow. Okay. We've got one last more comment from former law enforcement investigator turned direct action everywhere member, Tiffany Brunelli.
Yeah, I'm just really encouraged by everyone's comments here on the last thoughts. It sounds like things are going well, and we may have a verdict maybe by Friday, maybe by Monday. So I'm excited.
Well, let me say this. I have covered a lot of high profile cases. I'm shocked at how quickly it started moving once we got into the testimony phase. I was shocked by how fast the prosecution's direct case in chief was. I'm shocked at how quickly the defense case, I mean, there were other witnesses like Zoe's mother, who's a veterinarian. We haven't heard from her on the witness stand. And also, I'm shocked at how short the direct examination of the defendant was. And that could be a great strategy. I mean, you just keep talking, you can buy back the sale. You know what they say, right? Look at Jodi Arias. Famously, she's the convicted murderess of her ex-boyfriend. She was on the witness stand for something like 18 days. Of course, she seemed to enjoy being on the witness stand and enjoy the attention a lot. But she was still, nevertheless, convicted. And so the length of your testimony is not a measure of how good it is. It may have been very surgical and incredible, that direct testimony. And by the way, we applied to be the pool camera. Unchained TV did apply to be the pool camera to bring our viewers and any other media video from inside the courtroom, and it was turned down. So we're still cameras. So that's why we rely on an X feed, somebody taking notes inside the court. But I feel like I'm not feeling either way, because with these high profile cases, you do not know. I have characterized them many times like a runaway freight train. Celebrity trials, which were really the only trials I ever covered, people make all sorts of predictions and they're just guessing. Nobody knows, because when you have a high profile case, there are so many factors that it's impossible to predict with any kind of reliability. So I would say it's a big, giant question mark. Please come back to watch more tomorrow here on Unchained TV. We have been providing daily live coverage with our incredible panel. Unchained TV is a 501c3 nonprofit news and entertainment network to cover the sustainable, plant-based, cruelty-free lifestyle. You can watch us on Unchained TV. Unchained.tv. Be a part of it. Share out this video if you're watching on social media. This is history in the making.